Also has to do with migration. A large amount of people from Kentucky, Tennessee over time have migrated to central Indiana. But I would argue that Indianapolis is very much a southern city for various reasons. All right, now let's go to the dialect maps. Here's my dialect map. I was looking at this and was like, I don't know, that doesn't really make sense. But then I started thinking about it. Well, I lived in Ohio for a bit of time. I lived in Cincinnati for a bit of time. I got a lot of relatives from Northern Virginia, Southern Maryland. It started making sense to me. And of course, we can kind of see a particular pattern as far as the Hoosier dialect. And so this is a map. This is from the quiz I took, and here are my results. Anybody have results that are really, really different from that?
Mine's like all in the Midwest, like just deep red all through the middle.
Huh? Any idea why?
I don't really have any relatives anywhere except Indiana, so it's like Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri, all that.
Well, I just thought of something. All right, so let's do a 5-point extra credit assignment that can be have it due next time. It's optional. It's extra credit. 5 points. I'll add to whatever you want me to add to. I'll add to Map Quiz 1. So print out this map and analyze it. Print it out, analyze it.
Our dialect?
Print it out and analyze it. Yep, and just write on it. And then turn it in. So all you're going to be turning into me is one piece of paper that's the printout of this. And you're going to draw on it, analyze, and kind of, do a professional geographer thing to figure out what's going on. Why is that the case? I kind of showcase that, try to explain why I lived in Ohio. Why, I don't know, but I lived there. Yeah.
I actually had a question about mine, because mine's mostly all blue, except for like in the middle of Indianapolis, Chicago, and then all of California. But everything else is just blue. As far as I can see.
I don't know. That's interesting. So do you have California? I have no idea.
I watch a lot of TV.
I do too.
No, but I'm saying for the majority of TV, unless they're like specific characters that are from regions, all the characters have a set way of speaking.
I have no idea. If we go, kind of, I don't know where this can fit. Out there. Journalists, broadcasters, people in network broadcasting have identified the most desirable accent/dialect for a reporter is actually Indiana. Central Indiana. Why? And I would argue it's because we're kind of a nice mix. We don't have an overbearing, obnoxious, annoying accent. I might talk a little weird, but for the most part, we've got a very plain accent. This is, once again, central Indiana. It's very much a characteristic, I think, of the Midwest. We don't have that nasally northern Indiana region. We don't have that kind of southern drawl that we find in southern part. We're kind of right there in the middle. And I think that's one reason why we have these cluster of broadcasting schools, but so many broadcasters from this area find jobs all throughout the country. Now, is that dialect discrimination? I don't know. Call the ACLU and get them on that. We'll figure that one out, but I don't know. Did we all get the extra credit? We all understand it? If you don't know, come up to me afterwards. We'll figure it out. We'll catch everyone up. All right, let's now move on to religion. So language was cool. Now let's go a little bit deeper, go to religion. So another way we can see culture on these maps is via religion. So this is a map that shows how religious are you. And so if you're really, really religious, you're maroon. If you're you're kind of that in-between color. If you're no way, then you're white or light colored. What's a particular region in which they're pretty big on religion?
I thought Dixon would have been heavier.
I thought it would too. I don't know what's going on there. Essentially rural places. Rural places where you have a higher amount of religiosity. So you can think about the breadbasket, parts of the empty quarter. In particular,
Utah.
Mormons. Mormons are pretty serious about their religion. And so Mormons are pretty serious, and you can see that high religious. This isn't really mapping Mormons. This is just how much people really, really are geeked out about religion. And so we can see that area that you talked about before, missionaries, I don't know, maybe that's what's going on there. But you can kind of see the interior. The breadbasket and empty quarter are where we're going to find high religiousness. Where it declines is definitely ecotopia. Ecotopia, you can see a very, very dramatic decline in how religious people are. And so there we have more secular, to use a big term. So not as many churches out here, not many practicing religious people. I don't know why. I probably have theories, but I'm not going to go there. All right, leading church bodies. So now this is a map that shows, okay, in a particular area, in a particular county, which is the #1 most prevalent church in that particular area. So what can we say about Dixie?
Baptist.
Baptist. And so Dixie equals Baptist, overwhelmingly. What could we say about Mex-America?
Catholic.
Mex-America equals Catholic, overwhelmingly. What could we say about New England?
Catholic.
Catholic, overwhelmingly. Ecotopia,
Catholic.
Catholic, overwhelmingly. So yeah, they might not be too religious out there, but what this is, especially this side of the country, Latin Americans, Mexicans, El Salvadorans, very much Roman Catholics. And so you can see the Roman Catholics in this area that are heavily Latino. You go up there, a lot of the Catholics up there are like a lot of those Catholics been Catholic for a long, long time. So where we see a lot of Catholic universities in the United States is up in the northeastern and upper Midwest area. See Notre Dame, see St. John's, see Boston College, for examples of those. What could we say about the breadbasket?
It's a mix.
We're just going to say it's a catch-all, it's kind of it's just whatever. So of all the regions, it's the one that doesn't have as much what we would say homogeneity. And so here it's got a little bit of orange, a little bit of blue, a little bit of green, a little bit of red, and so it's very mixed. So I think that also speaks to some of the things we saw earlier. You know, we saw how the breadbasket's got some Germans, got some Russians, got some Swedes, got some Latinos, and so it's got a little bit of everything. And of course it spills over into much of the Baptist area here. All right, continuing on. Now let's go to unplanned pregnancies. Unplanned pregnancies. So what part of the country do we see a higher number of unplanned pregnancies? To Dixie, Mex-America, California. And that's where we have this kind of situation where it makes it look like, well, from corner to corner, they're having unplanned pregnancies. If we had a county level map, we'd see a little bit more clear differences. But my guess is this is going to be probably more in this area of California than just all throughout the entire country, or sort of a state. What do you think's going on here? Unplanned pregnancies.
Catholic.
Boom. One reason, Catholics, view of birth control. And so we already identified this area as strong Catholic presence. And so, you know, there you're having the baby. You're not going to get an abortion because it's very much a principle. And so they're very much pro-life, very much a fundamental belief of Catholics. I think so. I guess so. So we can say, no doubt, the Catholic religion has a role there. What would be a role that might have what would be a role here, but definitely right through here?
Poverty level?
Poverty, which poverty often correlates with education level. So poverty. Oh, I was going to say poverty and education. I don't know how that's funny. What did you say?
Pregnancy.
Oh. Yeah, that's the rule. That's the rule. But what leads to that? Education level. So if you look, one of the things that's I see it as a problem in the United States. This might be a little bit off the cuff. Is the fact that we have very high birth rates, high amounts of pregnancies from low-income individuals. So where that's a problem is those are individuals that are already starting behind the ball, but then that's more mouths to feed. So low-income areas have very high birth rates, and so we see that very much here in the South. South, lower education levels, lower income levels also correlate to higher prevalence of unplanned pregnancies. I don't know, Kentucky, there's been a few of these maps that Kentucky, I don't know what's going on there. Yeah, we're not going to figure that one out. Now it's kind of the same idea here. Well, not really the same idea. I told you sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And that's same-sex couples. So where do we find a high prevalence of same-sex couples, or then dissimilarly, where do we not see them?
You don't see it in rural.
You don't? Yeah, I guess I'd see that. So in the rural areas, you see definitely lighter amounts of same-sex couples. Using our region terms, New England, big time. This is where New England definitely has something that's very much characteristic is their view of same-sex couples. So they're okay with it. Why? Very much a liberal area of the country. If you look at the New England places, these are going to be areas that vote most heavily Democrat. So heavily Democrat. In fact, like you could say Connecticut and Vermont are probably one of the two most Democrat countries in the entire country. Democratic states in the entire country. So there's no doubt you can see that there. Where else? Ecotopia. What do you know? I'll just go ahead and say it. Very liberal there too. Very liberal. So where do we see the most liberal parts of our country? Liberal. We can also use proxy for Democrat. Stronghold, the coasts, the West Coast, Ecotopia, but also New England for sure. Hardcore Democrats. Throw in Washington D.C. and some other
It's
places.
also the least religious area.
Alaska.
Go ahead.
It's also like the least religious passion in the country. That's why too, probably.
Yeah, you could say that. I don't know if it's the least religious.
Well,
But on the previous map, yeah, we saw that for sure. So they're not going to be influenced by what religion tells them to do.
Yeah.
What's going on in northern Wisconsin? I think that's Wisconsin and Alaska.
Yeah.
And Alaska, and you could say parts of the empty quarter.
Those are really rural places.
Yeah.
Kind of like, I guess Alaska's right next to Canada, which is more liberal about those things, but I don't know about the other empty areas.
It's actually Native Americans. Native Americans have a high percentage of same-sex couples. Now that's something that's is it a new phenomenon? I don't know. As far as researchers identifying and learning about it, it's a rather new idea. It's something that's just now being figured out, is the large prevalence of Native Americans being same-sex couples. I have no idea why. One theory is in a lot of the tribes, transgendered is actually viewed very highly upon. You're actually seen as kind of a god to be transgendered.
It's like dual spirit or something like that.
Yeah, so you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So I'm not just making this up. The Native American population there is what's showing there. Now keep in mind, this whole area can look blue and so this whole entire area. Alaska looks like blue. But keep in mind, it's so sparsely populated. You have a few people same sex, it makes it look like all of it is. That's a geography problem we've had to deal with for years. But that's also another pocket of Native Americans there in the parts of Appalachia next to the Smoky Mountains. That's what's going on there. Same up there. That's where a lot of reservations are. A lot of casinos up there in that part of Wisconsin. Executions. So kind of people killing people because it's wrong. I messed that up big time. People killing people because they've done something wrong. What did they put 411 is here?
Religious.
I think this is almost a bipartisan map. What I mean by bipartisan, the same places that vote Republican are the same places that are in favor of the death penalty. The same places that vote Democrat are the ones that are not in support of the death penalty. Our coasts, New England, the Upper Great Lakes, very much Democratic areas. In fact, if we looked at an election map, it's almost identical to this. Kansas, I forget what's happening in Kansas. They've got, obviously have their own rules. It's been around for a while, but I don't know what makes Kansas unique in that regard. But for the most part, I think this sort of overlaps with the whole political, but you could say political also overlaps with other things, demographic, but I think this very much overlaps there. Oh my God, where are we at here? All right, we'll get through some beer here. Let's go to beer. Let's go to wine. Wine consumption. Wine consumption, quick 411, 1970 wine consumption, 2007, pretty much the quick 411. More people are drinking wine now than ever. But in particular, where are they drinking wine?
Coast.
New England, Ecotopia is definitely where we're going to see a lot more wine drinkers. And so that's also kind of one of the things we correlate with income and education. And so wine drinkers typically are going to be more people of higher income, higher education levels, which we see both in New England and Ecotopia. So once again, we're kind of building, we're talking about education and income by talking about wine. So we can kind of see how these concepts continue to overlap and come back to us again and again and again. Now let's go to beer. So beer consumption. Another thing which is increasing all throughout the country. In particular, more recently, it's increasing in Dixie. So Dixie used to be an area where there was no beer drinking, no alcohol. We don't do that. Now it's a little bit more, all right, we're cool with that. What do you notice about this?
Bread basket.
The bread. What we're going to do here is kind of focus in on gearheads. So we're going to continue this whole region thing, but now we're connecting it to cars, and the cars that people choose to buy and drive. And so I have a question here. What does the car preference say about each of these regions? And hopefully you started to kind of digest this as this was posted during our halftime.
American cars in the foundry and the breadbasket, a lot of trucks.
One great observation is the fact we see a large presence or preference for American cars in the foundry and in Dixie. But in particular the foundry. If you look at the foundry and Chevrolet, Ford, Cadillac, which is Detroit, Toyota, and Chevrolet. So 4 of the 5 are American-made, Detroit, coming out of Detroit, coming out of the big 3 automakers. Now, why? Why the foundry? Why there?
Where all the cars.
Where the cars are made. And so there's no doubt there's a lot of pride because these cars all come from the same region as the foundry, but a lot of these people are employed by these various companies. So it's just, they see it as very much a part of them. Now the Toyota Camry. And so one of the things that's kind of a new thing in the last 20 years is the fact that Honda and Toyota are now locating their assembly facilities here in the United States, particularly the foundry and in Dixie. And so Toyotas, this is kind of an odd deal. My Honda Element, 2003 Honda Element, Japanese automobile manufacturer, was assembled in Marysville, Ohio. So here it's kind of a new thing is the fact that, well, it might be a Toyota Camry, but where was it made? So one of the things is this might not just be, it's a Japanese. It could be a company that's made there locally, or it's assembled there locally. Other patterns here. That was great.
Well, the number 1 car in Ecotopia is environmentally conscious.
Exactly. So now we can tell, just by looking at car preference, we're now building bigger understandings of places in which they're very much strong environmentalists. And that relates very much to elections. We see the people that are typically more environmentally focused, concerned about environmental issues, are Democratic voters, and we see a lot of them in Ecotopia. So there's no doubt that plays itself out. The Prius being number 1. I don't think we see one of those anywhere else, do we?
No.
No.
And the Honda Fit, too.
Oh yeah, and the Honda Fit. The Honda Fit's not a hybrid, but it's like a golf cart.
All of the Ecotopia cars are like mid-sized to small cars.
So that can also relate to that kind of efficiency, small cars. So they're not big, huge SUVs. That makes sense. They don't have a large amount of snow, so they don't have to deal with the harsh, cold, brutal winters in which you would need a kind of a nice 4-wheel drive vehicle.
3 out of the 5 in Ecotopia are decently expensive cars. The Prius and Honda are affordable, but you've got Lexus, Audi,
Prius is pretty
BMW, big
expensive.
cash makers.
Boom, boom. Luxury cars. Where do we find luxury cars as a preference? We don't find them in the breadbasket. We don't find them too much in Dixie. Where do we see the preference for luxury cars? Ecotopia, but then also New England, kind of the wealthier areas. And so once again, it's a proxy for understanding income level. Just by looking at car type, we're being able to identify characteristics regarding income and environmental preference of views of the environment. What else we got?
I find it interesting that Dixie Mex America, the top car is a kind of like a muscle car, you know, Camaros are, but all of them there are fairly big cars, even though the Camaro's more of a sedan, it's a boat, you know, and the rest you've got trucks.
Gearheads.
Terrible gas mileage.
Yeah.
Anybody a hardcore gearhead? Tell me the difference between a Camaro and a Corvette.
Not much.
There's actually some difference. Definitely price level.
No idea.
They say Camaros are a poor man's Corvette. So Camaros, yeah, it's a sports car, it's a muscle car, but it's an entry-level muscle car. It's not that expensive. It's not a Viper. It's not a Corvette. It's a very affordable muscle car. So you find more Camaros in rural Indiana, for example. Southside Indy, tons of Camaros, but not so much in the north side. That's an income thing. Anything else?
Usage?
How so?
Well, I only know a couple of the ones in Foundry. I'm not a big car person, but of the 5, 3 of them are used by family members who are either in farming or have to deal with like livestock.
Yeah.
So with Ecotopia, I mean, that's great. They have a Prius, but they're probably driving from their apartment to like somewhere to their office. While with the Foundry, it's more so people who are having to like drive through either dirt roads or through forest areas or having to use it.
Yeah. It's kind of ironic. They're environmentalists out there, but they spend 4 hours in traffic, every day on a commute. But whatever. Let's go to Dixie. Let's take that idea to Dixie Mex America. I think it's more pronounced there.
Okay.
There you can see Dodge Ram, Toyota Tundra, Ford F-150. There you see the presence of trucks. It also shows the agricultural emphasis. And so there's probably a lot of places there where people are helping people move into houses and apartments.
Isn't that one of the Lexus, isn't it one of the SUVs that they make?
I think the Lexus is an income thing.
Oh, for sure. No doubt about
Lexus is
it.
like perceived as a nicer car, but people who buy them are people who want a BMW and can't afford a BMW.
That's very true. Very true.
England's kind of like all over the place.
Yeah, that's New England for sure, but you see more of the SUVs, Grand
smaller
Cherokee,
SUVs, though.
CRV, yeah, more efficient. So you kind of see that focus on efficiency and all of that. All right, now let's go to life expectancy. We're kind of going to now talk about health and disease. So what do we notice about life expectancy?
It's longer on the coast. We're Democrats.
Yeah. What's that?
So it's long. You live longer on the coast.
You live longer on the coast, and so you see that. See the coast there. Ecotopia has a long life expectancy. You could say South Florida for sure, New England, but also the upper breadbasket are places in which you're more likely to live longer. The inverse of that would be Dixie, a good chunk of Mex America, parts of the empty quarter, but for sure, no doubt, that Dixie is where we have a much lower life expectancy. And so the various reasons for that we're going to help to showcase right now and now. How can we explain life expectancy? And so my G110, I correlate life expectancy, how long you're going to live, to how much income your country, your region, or your household has. So the wealthier you are, the longer you're going to live. And that makes sense. I'm not going to go explaining all of that. But where do we find once again, areas in this Dixie where we have lower income? I know this is hard to see, but areas that are red are areas that are wealthier. I wish this map was clear. I wish you could see things much, if the reds were all here and then this area was bluer, it would be much easier to see it. But I think this also helps to showcase what I've been trying to emphasize by using all these things that weren't income related. We can see the wealthier coasts. We can see the wealthier parts of New England in the Foundry. So those things in which I talked about, sports cars, higher, Lexuses, BMWs are going to be found there where we have higher income levels. And so finally we can kind of see validation of all those things we've been talking about up until now. Another way, this is almost identical. This life expectancy and obesity. So there's no doubt that this has a lot to do with health characteristics. So age-adjusted obesity. So obesity rates highest there, and once again are 2 states that are often the least intelligent in the country. The lowest income, the lowest education level also has the highest obesity rates, and if we go back, also has very low life expectancy. And so income very much correlates to health. We can see that with those maps there. So the inverse of that, okay, where are people more likely to be not obese?
Colorado.
Colorado. Why is that?
Skiing? I don't know.
Paleo diet? They're all doing the paleo?
It's an outdoorsy state.
Very much so. Here's the role of lifestyle. It's an outdoor recreation lifestyle. If you know anyone that goes out there, they're not going out there just to stare at paintings. They're going out there to ski. They're going out there to snowmobile. They're going out there to BMX. They're going out there to smoke marijuana. No, they're going out there for all the various things that people would go out there for recreation purposes. And we can see that all throughout this area here. So it's not too sedentary. So you do not see a very sedentary lifestyle here. Now I find it very interesting that the states corner to corner, the same color. The geographer in me, the cartography in me says, something's up with that. That ain't right. There's got to be some variation in there for sure. But then of course we can see the sin of Nevada gets a lot of migrants. I didn't talk about this earlier, but you see a large number of males in Nevada. A lot of them are older men that migrate, single men that migrate to Nevada for casinos, prostitutes, all those things. We can see the coast here, very skinny. But then we get to our agriculture areas, like our valley, we can see people are more obese. And so rurality, more of an agrarian lifestyle, are all key factors for understanding why obesity is prevalent where it is. But once again, we can kind of also relate this to red states, blue states. So our Republican areas, typically our Democrat areas on the coast that are a little bit, where people are less likely to be obese. And so this is diabetes. I'm kind of beating this up here, but it's the same idea here. Of course, if you're going to be, if you're obese, you're probably going to be more likely to have diabetes. But diabetes, if we just look at the colors of the map, 1995, 2000, 2005, 2010, essentially the moral of the story is diabetes is very quickly on the rise in the United States. So this is going to be, so I know none of you are future health practitioners, but this is something you're going to see more and more of is diabetes cases. And this, once again, we see a higher prevalence of diabetes in those areas that are obese, which I just described in the previous slide. Further, let's go now to sports. Finally, we get to talk about something I like, sports. So here we can see what they try to do is this is an actual map in which they took a census. So they asked people to tell them where they live, then tell them their favorite team. So then what they did was they built this map here that tries to show baseball teams. And so all I'm really trying to get at here is the fact that here these regions are kind of big. These little blobs here are big, especially the Cardinals. Geez, red's big, but then they get smaller and smaller. Why is that?
More teams or more.
Exactly, more density, and so you got more people, and so you got more cities, more urban areas, and so then you're going to have more people that are going to say, well, why not put a baseball team here? It can survive because there's enough people that live here that'd be willing to go to a baseball game, a couple times a year. So what we can see here is how the regions, as far as the fan bases, also relate to that density thing I mentioned beforehand. Culture. Oh, I love culture. All right, now let's talk about culture. So let's talk about language, religion, sex, drugs, rock and roll, all that good stuff. All that good stuff that we're going to lump in with culture. So first off, percentage of the population who spoke a language other than English at home. So essentially what we can see here is the role of the Spanish language, no doubt. So the Spanish language, for sure, is what we're seeing here as far as why so many people here speak a language other than English. We already know that, though. Mex-America, that's kind of relating to the things we've already talked about. Mex-America, South Florida, parts of Ecotopia, large Latin American influence, and especially Spanish. And so that's what we quickly can kind of see there. But we can also see as far as the breadbasket, the empty quarter, and Dixie has kind of the inverse of that, where English is overwhelmingly the language spoken. And so this kind of dovetails very nicely with what we've already talked about. But let's go a little bit further. Let's now remove English, and now let's remove Spanish as the #1 language. Now what do we see here? And this is one of these maps. These are all maps I didn't make. They make my eyes bleed, but we're going to try to figure them out. First off, this light taupey green, or this puke green color here, Native American. Where do you see Native American languages being spoken? Empty quarter, so it plays out very much like we've already talked about, but also there in eastern Oklahoma. One of the things is this other kind of this lighter green, pea green, German. And so you can see that German influence today is still here. Now, I realize that we're not all speaking German, but those that can speak German, of course, it's going to be due to its lineage of German heritage. And so what this does, I think, does a good job of helping to showcase actual people, culture. And so language is a good way to understand and identify culture as well. Another thing that might be of interest there. Let's break this down one more time.
Is
French and Dixie.
French.
Is it going to be Creole lumped into that? The same thing with German, you're going to have Dutch-speaking Amish people lumped
You got
into
it. You got it. So a large amount of this is related to like Amish and Mennonites, individuals who are of German heritage, who are more rural. But same thing plays out here, the Cajuns. But also up there. It makes sense. Of all the areas of the country, it's the one that's closest to Quebec, a French-speaking province. It would make sense you're going to see a lot more French up here because it's along the border. All right, we hit that one hard. Now let's talk about what we call a Coke. So what do you call a soft drink? And so, yeah, I know, I show this, and we could dissect this one big time. But nonetheless, what I'm trying to get at here is we can see, once again, regional differences. Regional differences in what you call a soft drink. You call it a Coke, you call it a pop, you call it a soda pop. Nonetheless, though, we can see language, just the way we use words, showcased here on a map, I think helping to illustrate or maybe prove this whole idea of these regions that are fairly unique. And so, of course, why here? Why so much Coke here? Coca-Cola?
Coca-Cola, capital.
production.
I mean, Coke is a Southern cultural icon. Capital of Coke, Atlanta. They've got the World of Coke there. Had a lot of bottling throughout this area of the country. And so here, people identify with Coke. It's very much Southern. But then why here? We're not South, are we?
We have 2 Coke plants in the Indianapolis area.
Yeah, that might play a role. I mean, that might play a small role. But once again, Indianapolis, I think, this is where, once again, it's kind of a dividing line. It's where we have 3 different lines coming through it on our map quiz. And so I would say Indianapolis is very much, if you're coming from the north to the south, the gateway to the south. And so once you get through southern Indiana, you are in the south.